Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of our retro look back. Let's go back 1 year to May of 2025. Rex and I brought you 6 different movies, and we'll outline them all for you tonight. The cinematic class is about to begin, and your professor is in. Greetings, salutations, and other sundry affair. I am your cinematic professor and purveyor of truth in movies. And yes, 1 year ago today, Rex and I brought you 6 rather unique movie reviews. Those movies have long since left the theaters. They are available on video on demand, and of course, they are inundating the streamers. So if you're flipping through some movies and you're not quite sure, I've never heard of this one, quite sure, I'm not sure about whether I'd watch it. Here's your look back to see what's on the streamers now and what you may have missed. Let's take a look at the 6 that we covered for you. First off was Clown in a Cornfield. This actually gained some traction and found a cult following, even though the movie itself was a little wonky. Desert Dawn starred Kellen Lutz, and it was a pretty decent action film. First Moon was a very unique werewolf movie. It was about a girl and her first time transformation. They brought in radio personalities and everything. It was kind of interesting. Healing Towers attempted to capture the Jeffrey Combs, H.P. Lovecraft Mean. Just didn't do it very, very well. The New Boy. Wow. Pulled in a big star on this one, but it was no. You know what? Maybe some really liberal people, progressives, who think other cultures are far superior to America. They may have liked this. Otherwise, no. And finally, The Ugly Stepsister. This was kind of interesting. It was a foreign film, but it was based on the story of Cinderella. What they did was they took Cinderella and they turned it into a body horror film. Body horror was nice and popular thanks to Demi Moore, and they tried to do that with this classic tale. In fact, it became so immersed with the story that they started calling the lead character Cinderella halfway through, and it wasn't even her name. So there you have it. Let's look back now on the movies that made up May of 2025. Greetings, salutations, and other sundry affair. I am your cinematic professor and purveyor of truth in movies. And tonight's lesson plan is a film called Clown in a Cornfield. Hey, this thing starts off as a fairly decent horror story and then turns absolutely silly. Let me don my specs here so I can read these names for you and tell you what's going on here. Oh, good old Dr. Glenn has a bit of a problem. His wife has died. He's really upset about it. And he decides that, the big city life is just too much for him. He needs to slow down a little bit, get his head back in the game. So he takes a job as a small town doctor. Now, Dr. Glenn is played by Aaron Abrams, and he brings along his daughter, Quinn, who was played by Katie Douglas. Well, like most kids who are teenagers, and she's 17, Quinn wants nothing to do with a small town. She would much rather live in the big city where things are happening all the time. And while she understands her father has to go through some grief, like most teenagers, she just doesn't feel like she has to put up with it. All right? So we have a conflict here, and these conflicts usually set things up. But I gotta say this right from the get go, even though Quinn is bordering on being a young woman at age 17, she is the epitome of what is happening to kids nowadays who are raised by parents who, for some god awful reason, decided never to discipline their children. These are the parents who, when their 5 or 6 year old starts acting up, they try to, brace yourself, reason with the child. Ah, how that for irony. Reason with a child. No, that does a lot better, a lot quicker. Okay. And you can tell she's been spoiled and she's basically a brat. And she's acting that way in this movie. And, your heart goes out to Dr. Quinn saying, if you'd just manned up when she was younger, she wouldn't be causing you all this grief now. So naturally, Dr. Quinn, or Dr. Glenn rather, uh, advises Quinn to be careful in the new town, watch who she hangs out with, and that brings in Cole. Cole is played by Carson McCormick, and Cole is the town bad boy. Okay, he's the good-looking kid, but he's pretty much a troublemaker. In fact, rumors around the town are that he actually burnt down the corn syrup factory. What corn syrup factory, you ask? Well, the whole town that they've moved into, Kettle Springs, bases its entire existence upon a corn syrup factory called Bay Pen. And for its advertising branding, Bay Pen has a clown as its symbol and as its spokesperson. And that clown is named Friendo. Okay, Friendo the clown. Well, somewhere along the line, Friendo the clown has transformed from a marketing phenomenon to a serial killer, okay, who habits the cornfield. So there's our massive setup on this thing. And I got to tell you that a couple of big name stars actually swing by this movie for, let's call it extended cameos. Will Sasso comes in on this. He plays the sheriff of the town, Sheriff Dunn, and he is the very typical, small country sheriff who is definitely has it in for Cole and basically just thinks kids are troublemakers anyway. So there you have it. And Kevin Durant swings by as the mayor of the town, who's trying to keep everything together and just happens to also be Cole's father.
This is what I wanted to show you. Isn't it cool?
Yeah, it is really cool. Where'd you get it from?
I'm OG Kettle Springs, baby. I got all kinds of stuff.
Does it work?
Try it.
Look out!
They're really big on tradition around here.
Every year, there's this parade where everyone gathers around a Friendo float.
Friendo?
It's the clown on all the Bay Pen corn syrup labels. He's practically a local legend.
Smile, Philly girl. You're about to become a sensation.
Be careful who you hang out with. There's some real weirdos at this town.
Yeah, sis. Yeah, very funny, man.
Hey, Ginger! You okay?
There's a psycho dressed up like Brendo, trying to kill us.
Call 911.
Where's the button, Jen? What is this? What is
What kind of phone is this?
Okay, so what we have here are a plethora of typical template horror issues all lined up and ready to be spelled out. But then we have to kind of point a finger at writer and director Eli Craig for taking this thing down a totally different road. Craig is probably best known for his work with Tucker and Dale versus Evil, that movie, which kind of became like a cult type movie. Uh, what Eli tries to do in this movie is he tries to make it more socially conscious. Okay, he wanted a bit more. So we already have established that there is a small town versus big town feel. Dr. Glenn needs the quiet and solitude of a small town to try to heal from the loss of his wife. His daughter Quinn wants the big town. All the kids in town, uh, they live in a small town. They realize that, but they want the big town life and the opportunities a big town would present. The people in the town, the older people, like their small, quiet little town and don't like the fact that there are people moving in, coming from the big city, bringing their big city ways. Okay, so we have all of that conflict going on in here. But Eli wanted to take it a step further, and what he does is he tries to bring in two more social elements. The first is anti-capitalism. Well, of course he's going to do this. This is a mainstay of Hollywood. They love to be anti-capitalist, especially when they're making their money through capitalism. Why, no, I am an artist. Yeah, you're selling your art. Sit down. So we have that story going on where uh, um, they're trying to set up the embodiment of Friendo the Clown, serial killer, as an extension of capitalism gone wrong. No, it doesn't work. It's lame. Okay, and they could have done without it most certainly. The other social comment that Eli wants to make in his script is generational. The young generation has all of these great ideas and they're filled with life and vim and vigor. And the old generation basically is a bunch of fuddy duddies who are stuck in the past and won't accept change. And in this case, want to be in bed with uh, Friendo the killer clown. Okay, so you have that's dragged to extremes, of course, but you get the idea there, and both of those social commentaries really turn this movie about three-fourths of the way through the film. It takes a noticeable turn and goes from a schlock B horror movie to a really bad social commentary movie.
Hey, check it out, it's Friendo.
there's one other thing that Eli Craig does in his script, and I'm one of the people that are getting really, really tired of this. But it seems to be the way things go in Hollywood, and you can't get away from Hollywood without this stuff happening. And that is, the big gay agenda. Now, folks, not too long ago, they did a study, and the study said that seeing two men kiss is repulsive to men. So, unless you want your audience to be completely devoid of men, and I don't know why you would do that because that's over 50% of your audience, it's best to avoid those scenes. They turn men off. Now, the survey compared two men kissing on screen to a man cutting into his steak and seeing maggots writhing inside the steak and eating the inside of the steak. Pretty gross. Okay? Pretty gross. So Eli has to stick not one, but two scenes in here of men kissing. It's disgusting. It's gross. This is not normal behavior, people. Okay? Uh, Producers and filmmakers feel they need to do this nowadays because 87% of Hollywood is queer. They belong into the alphabet group. So as a result, you're catering to that audience. Trouble is, that's not the audience that's filling the seats inside the stadium. You know what I'm saying? That audience is 3% queer. Okay? So I understand where they have a conflict and they're trying to appease their producers and their distributors and what have you, but this really does backfire. Now, I will say this. In this movie, those two scenes, which could have been reduced to one and they would have gotten the point across, are set up so that it does explain a certain character's actions. Okay? I don't want to give anything away, but the way this character acts throughout the movie, you begin to scratch your head and say, something's up here. This isn't quite kosher. And then when it turns out that the person is queer, you go, aha, now that explains this erratic behavior. Okay. So in that case, I'll say I can understand, but they didn't need two scenes to do it. They only needed one. And they added the other one, like I said, just to appease those agenda people. All right. And again, it's not any less revolting because when it comes on, your first inclination is shut this shit off. Okay, so wrapping this review up, we have Sabrina Pitre is our editor on this. I don't know if she gives it the French accent, but I gave it to her. She's best known for her work on Snowpiercer. Snowpiercer, the movie, was kind of enjoyable. It was one of those science fiction movies that had a very heavy social commentary on it, but I thought they did it rather well. When it moved over to TV, I didn't make it past the first season. I got to be honest with you. And part of the reason was the editing. I thought it was not paced well. But anyway, Sabrina put this movie together, and she backloaded it. Okay, so instead of putting a lot of Eli's social commentary throughout the film, so that maybe it was a little bit more palatable, she dumped all those scenes at the end, and by the time the end of the movie comes, you're waiting for it to be over. Our cinematography was Brian Pearson, and he's most notable for Insidious Part 3, and he did the newer version of Happy Valentine's Day, shot for that. So he has some horror chops behind him. And this is another one of those horror movies, folks, that, as I said, it starts out as a pretty decent horror flick, and once it turns into the social commentary movie, in order to keep the horror genre intact, they throw in a couple of what is now known as body horror scenes, a couple of really gruesome scenes, you have Friendo with a chainsaw, so we'll bring that in. There's another stereotype for you, a trope. And we'll bring him in with a hatchet. There's another one, big knife. So we get a couple of gore scenes in there to try to keep it under the horror thing, even though it's basically just preaching, you know. Let's stand up for the youth, and all old people are useless and must die. Absolute nonsense. This started out pretty decent. I thought it was going to be an okay, Saturday night sci-fi special schlock. And then all the commentary came in. I'd advise Eli Craig not to do that again. Stick to the horror genre and make it a lot cleaner to watch, and everything will be okay. This one really slipped in the final reels, and as such, we're going to slip it in its grade and give it a D. And now that you have learned what you have learned, here endeth your lesson. Greetings, salutations, another sundry affair. I am your cinematic professor and purveyor of truth in movies. And the truth of this movie is there literally are way too many editors adding in to this movie. And as a result, the editing in this is exceptionally choppy. In fact, it's almost as if all three editors were trying to defeat each other in the editing room. I'll give you an example. Well, a very basic editing technique is the fade to black. Okay? In the fade to black, unlike the dissolve, instead of going from one picture and dissolving into another frame, you actually have your one picture, you fade down to black, and then you fade up from black on the next frame so that you get a nice little dipsy doodle type thing, fade into black, come up from black. They don't even have this right in this movie, okay? There are times they have it, and then there are times when you see the fade to black and then the other picture just pops right in, and vice versa. And there are times when you fade to black and it's black for longer than it should be. There's no consistency there. So, you might say to yourself, Professor, I'm just watching a movie, and those technical things wouldn't matter to you. Oh, yes, they would, because you will notice them even if you don't know what's causing them, because they cause a disruption in the flow of the film. Okay, tonight's lesson plan is a movie called Desert Dawn, and it comes from the folks at Saban Films. And generally speaking, Saban Films does a fine job in bringing you these independent action films, and that's exactly what Desert Dawn is, although the name is kind of sketch at best. Gotta tell you, this stars Kellen Lutz. I like to speak a little bit about Kellen here. Kellen's a big boy. All right, make no mistake about it. He even played Hercules in the movie, so you can't get a small guy to play Hercules. He's a very big boy. But man, there's a couple of things going bad with Kellen. First off, this area here is odd. Okay, now there are a lot of stars who need special attention when it comes to the cinematography. There was one actress back in the golden era of Hollywood who could only be shot from one side because the other side didn't look as good. All right. Um, Kellen's got a problem in that area, and he needs his makeup to be just so. Otherwise, he looks browbeaten. And I don't think they give him the attention he needs in this movie. So, a strike against the makeup department on that. There are times when he just doesn't look movie star-ish. Okay, the other problem with Kellen is he is a very big boy, but it doesn't look like he can fight very well. Now, to help him out, his co-star in this is Cam Gigandet, and Cam can fight. He's been in a lot of these action movies, especially the ones done by Saban, and he can hold his own in a fight scene. Now, next to Kellen, he looks a lot smaller, but they're smart enough in this movie, the producers are, to let Cam handle most of the fight scenes, and they give Kellen the gun and tell him to shoot. That's probably the best thing they did in this movie. Okay, so basically what's happening here in Desert Dawn? Well, Kellen plays Luke. Luke is the new sheriff in town. Cam plays John. John wanted to be the sheriff. And if you take a look at the credentials, John probably should have been the sheriff, okay? But Luke gets promoted ahead of him, and so there's tension here between our two law enforcement individuals, so that when they run up against some nefarious no-goods in cartels, well, you not only have the problem of good guy versus bad guy, but you have two good guys who are constantly bucking heads with one another. And you spend an awful lot of the movie, well, Luke does, apologizing to be, you can't have this mammoth of a man who's supposed to be the symbol of law and authority, and every time you turn around, he's apologizing. That just doesn't wash very well at all. Also starring in this is Helena Haro as Cheyenne, and let me mention Chad Collins too as Danes. There's a subplot in this movie about Luke's sister, and it probably would have made the movie a lot more cohesive if that subplot had been developed better. But it's not. It's almost as if they've decided to emphasize, instead of the sister subplot, the conflict between Luke and John. And when that conflict is resolved, it's really no big deal. Whereas the conflict with the sister is much better and really much more important to the story. Writers for this were Chad Law and John Walters, and they just had the wrong emphasis on the wrong part of the story. And as such, this story hurts.
I, Luke Easton, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Let me introduce you to our new sheriff.
It's gonna be a fun adventure working with you.
Luke, good to have you back, son. You get a chance to see Cheyenne yet?
I never should have left.
And why did you?
What do we got? We have a suicide. We have a murder. And a bag full of money. Yeah.
You have my money.
Who's this?
The man who's gonna have you killed.
I can't do this without you.
You're gonna get us both killed.
I need you to pick up a package for me.
My name is Fernando Carrillo. I run the Juarez cartel. You have something that belongs to me.
Light him up!
And what makes you think I'll work for you?
What are you gonna do?
If you hurt her, I will kill you.
Don't play games with me.
A few more people behind the camera in this one. Our director of photography was Brandon Ruiz. He does yeoman duty on this. And the director was Marty Murray. Yeah, I think Marty might have had a better vision for this film than the three editors did. This really became discombobulated in post, and you can see it, and that's kind of a shame because you only have so much time in post, and you only have so much of a budget, especially when you're dealing with an independent film and you're going through a studio like Saban. So you've got to use your talent and your money wisely. And putting three different editors on this definitely did not work. It was not a good thing from the get go. And again, I got to go back to the writers, Chad Law and John Walters. While they had the foundation there for a fairly decent action story, oh my God, ladies and gentlemen, the dialogue in this story is atrocious. Now, I'll admit to you that Cam is probably a Class B actor, and we can even throw Kellen in that group. They're not A-listers, okay, but they're good, solid B-level actors, and they should thrive in action film. But oh my God, even those gentlemen with all of their talents cannot salvage the dialogue. I mean, they're saying things, and you're sitting there going, "Oh my God, who wrote this? A kindergarten?" It's really that bad. So, what could have been a pretty decent action flick with, some nice casting, just goes to hell in a handbasket. First, in the writing, especially the dialogue, and then secondly, in the editing room. So this one really slips. We're going to give it below average, and believe me, that's not common for Saban. Usually, they come up with a lot better of these independent action films. So now that you have learned what you have learned, here endeth your lesson. Greetings, salutations, and other sundry affairs. I am your cinematic professor and purveyor of truth in movies, and tonight's lesson plan is a movie called First Moon. Now, this movie has some interesting things going for it, but as werewolf movies go, I don't think it is. Let me explain. If this creature is a werewolf, then it is the hairless Mexican Chihuahua version of the werewolf. I've seen at least 4 werewolf movies in the last 6 weeks or so. And 4 of them really haven't fit into what you would call werewolf territory. I mentioned and went into a little bit of a rant or a diatribe, if you will, on show number 675. So if you go online and look under Outtakes with Rex Reel, show number 675, you'll see what I have to say about this recent spat of werewolf movies that aren't really werewolf movies. And this one certainly falls into it. Now, while they mention the wolf as an animal, they call this thing more a demon. And once you see it, you'll shake your head and say, yeah, it's pretty much a demon. It's not really a werewolf. This comes from the folks at One Tree Entertainment. And I have to tell you, it comes from Australia. And this is the second movie I've seen within 3 weeks that originated from Australia that really has a hard-on for the Catholic religion. Not exactly sure what's going on down there in the land down under, but man, the movie makers down there have got a thing about the church. If you take a look at their news headlines and see how their leaders are leading them down the path of globalist wokeism, perhaps that might explain it, because you can't have global wokeism without first destroying all religion. Okay, so we have this poor girl, Jessica, and she is played by Lauren Esposito. And all we know is that Jessica has been captured and is really being treated like a dog, thrown into a cage, and everyone is trying to protect her from her first moon. Now, a little bit of a sidebar here. This movie actually delves into a religious situation that is becoming a little bit more prominent in the church now, and that is uh, demons as people. So, demons from hell who are meant to destroy souls and the goodness in people, but yet they look like people with very good intentions. Kind of reminds you of the Democratic Party, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. Okay, I digress. In any event, one of the main characters trying to help Jessica is Brother Thomas, who is played by Julian Curtis. You know, he's in kind of a bind here. He really wants to help Jessica, but at the same time, he really likes her. Not in a sexual way, because of course he's a brother and a clergyman, but because he just thinks that she's really a wonderful person. And isn't this the real power of the demon, to make people like them, thinking that, the strength of the vampire is that people won't believe in him, to quote Bram Stoker. We also have Shannon Ryan in this movie as Sister Elsie, and Sister Elsie is the nun that seems to have a grasp on what's going on. So as we see all these things happening to Jessica, it's Sister Elsie that has it under wraps and knows what's shaking. Behind the camera, Dylan Pierce is our director of photography. You know, I got to give him some kudos. He does a good job in this, and the reason is he knew, pardon me, he knew he had a really bad budget. This was not a big budget movie. So what he does is he makes excellent use of shadows in his framing, and he keeps all of his shots tight because he knows if he starts pulling out, things are going to look fake. Okay. Now, there are some times where he can't avoid that, but for the most part, he does a nice job at keeping everything tight and in shadow. First Moon was written and directed by Peter McLeod, and Peter is the second director to come along out of Australia that really has a gripe against the church. This group who is trying to save Jessica from turning into this full-fledged demon is not the church per se. It is a radical rogue splinter group of the church who has decided that the church is too mamby-pamby to handle these demons on earth, and that they are the more radical. We need to take action, and going into these far extremes to put this whole thing together. Movie was edited by Dan Sievert. He's kept this down to 90 minutes, and that's certainly a good thing. And because they feel they have to, this is really getting almost intolerable. There is a totally unnecessary queer segment in this. The entire movie functions without it. They put it in just to virtue signal, and just because it seems to be the thing now. When you're trying to woo Hollywood, and Hollywood is made up of 87% alphabet people, then you got to throw a scene like this in, I guess, to appease the distributor. I don't know. It's unnecessary. It doesn't need to be in there, and it's really just kind of a waste of time. Makeup for our demon was done by Thomas Sepronat, and if you're looking for a werewolf, this ain't gonna cut it. As werewolves go, this one's bad. But if you follow the premise that this thing is a demon who follows the tenets of a werewolf with the full moon and everything, well, then in that case, I guess he's done okay with this. It's kind of run of the mill demon thing, and I don't think that Lauren Esposito was probably the best actress to get to play this, because once she's in makeup, she's kind of awkward and looks like a fish out of water. Probably needed somebody else to be in that costume and act more demonic. It may have helped. So there we have it. First Moon. I'm not even going to call it a werewolf movie. I'm going to call it a demon movie, radicalized church group going out and fighting demons. Kind of like that concept, but they kind of blew it in this one. From the land down under in Australia, from One Tree Entertainment. It's kind of worth a look, but and we'll give it like a C minus for a grade. And now that you have learned what you have learned, try as they may, with all these werewolf movies coming out, nobody has been able to touch Benicio del Toro's remake of The Wolfman. That's still standing up there as, yeah. Now that you have learned what you have learned, here endeth your lesson.
Welcome back to the show. We have another movie that is posing as a horror film simply because it has several scenes in it that are rather gruesome. This is a pattern that's becoming rather monotonous. It's listed under body horror, and it's not going to fly. The name of the movie is Healing Towers, and it's from One Tree Entertainment. It commences with a seemingly benevolent doctor who wishes to provide care and housing to the homeless. Most noble, would you say not? However, he has rather nefarious motives behind his rather magnanimous gestures. To find out about them, let's once again peel back the veils of time to the early Cretaceous period and check in with Rex Reel.
Healing Towers is not a horror movie. It is an amazingly terrible film that struggles to reach schlock B levels. The acting by the cast is on a level one normally sees in drive-in marathons. Shuja Paul is writer, director, and editor, and he does none well. Shankalp Dupre is director of photography. His imaging is flat, with nothing creative through the lens. The film's conclusion is rushed and inconclusive, leaving far too many plot lines unresolved. Healing Towers causes only pain for its viewers.
Healing Towers stars Andrew Keegan, William McNamara, Nikki Lee, and Ava Westcott. Here's a look.
I look after the most underrepresented patients.
Moving here, I feel very safe.
You are in a safe zone.
The medicine that I gave you makes you dream. The line between
dreams and reality gets blurrier. This is my daughter's.
Where is she? Where's Casey?
You're sick!
Nope. I'm not. I'm a healer. This is how we bring peace to troubled minds.
Greetings, salutations, another sundry affair. I am your cinematic professor and purveyor of truth in movies. And tonight's lesson plan is a movie called The New Boy. And it comes from the land down under. And it actually takes place in Australia back in 1940. And as I said in the teaser open, Warwick Thornton, whose movie this is trying to draw an analogy here between the Aborigines and Christians. And the Christians don't fare well in this battle, even though in his statement he readily admits that it wasn't until he was indoctrinated into Christianity that he became a more rounded and complete person. There is a young man, a young boy, who is known throughout the movie as the new boy. And he's wild, living in the desert, and none of the Aborigine tribes around claim him. As they say, he doesn't belong. No one's sure how he got there, but he is basically living like a wild animal and attacking anyone in the desert who comes near. So, as a result, he is finally corralled and brought to an orphanage where hopefully they can, take care of him a little bit and see what happens. So, what starts as a humanitarian effort to find a good home, a good setting, and hopefully a little bit of civilization for this wild child actually turns into a conflict between Christianity, in this case Catholicism, and the Aboriginal spiritualism that this boy apparently is influenced by. All right, let me give you a little bit of what's going on behind the camera here and take out my specs so I can read these names. Our cast includes Kate Blanchett, who also threw some money behind this movie as well. She plays Sister Eileen. Sister Eileen is an interesting character in that this is, don't forget, 1940s in Australia, and at the time in the 1940s, Australia, like America, was pretty much run by men. That's why things ran so much better. And as a result, she is running this orphanage. There is no man there. So, in order to be taken seriously, she invents this man who is actually responsible for the orphanage. But Don Peter is never seen because it's actually her. And this is how she circumvents the whole organization of religion and what have you, making it feel that she is just subservient to this guy who runs the orphanage and what have you. Okay, so that is Sister Eileen. The new boy who is found and brought to the orphanage is played by Aswin Reed, and Hollywood is always big on these child actors who make a big splash in their first movie. I'm sure Oswin Reed is going to fall into this category. He doesn't do a bad job at all in playing this role and fits into it rather nicely. And Deborah Mailman is also in this as Sister Mum. And Wayne Blair plays George. Both of those actors are very popular in Australian productions and probably will not be too familiar with American audiences, but they are somewhat staples over there, and certainly those audiences will recognize them right away. Sitting behind the camera, as I told you, Thornton is the man who wrote and directed this. He has some nice work from the camera operator, who is Jules Worm, and Jules provides some very nice drone shots and scenery shots of the wilds back there in Australia. It's scenic. What more can you say? And they're rather good. Our editor is Nick Myers. This is actually the second time that Myers and Thornton have worked together. And well, considering the movie, it comes in at 90 minutes, so I can't really complain about the length too much. But it is paced rather poorly. And when the conflict finally does come up, well, it's choppy. It's very, very choppy. So that Sister Eileen begins to go through a rather strange metamorphosis. You see, the whole point that Thornton is trying to make in his movie is that if one religion exists, then all religions can exist. This is a dangerous philosophy. This comes from the same people who say every culture is good in its own. No, that folks, that is not true. That's not even close to being true. If you look at some of the barbaric items that some cultures do, no, there's no way. And even here in America, we have some subcultures which I wouldn't give 2 cents for. So, no, not every culture is equal, and not every culture needs to be held in the same esteem as one another, and the same is held true for religions. However, Thornton's whole aspect behind this movie is to prove that the Aboriginal spiritualism is encompassing and will allow all different religions to work with other religions, whereas Christianity is a dominating religion and won't let any other religions exist along Christianity. Well, that viewpoint is his viewpoint, and he's making the movie, so that's the point that comes through. But it is skewed, and like Steely Dan said, show business kids making movies of themselves, and they don't give a fuck about anybody else. So there you go. There you have it. What happens with Sister Eileen in this is a type of metamorphosis. You see, the new boy, the wild boy, has a talent, if you will, an ability to be a healer. And Aborigines believe in healers. Hell, you saw this in Crocodile Dundee, did you not? Both one and two. And they show this in the movie by allowing him to create a spark with his fingertips. Okay, and he can help people who are injured and help heal them. And apparently, this healing process really bothers Sister Eileen to the point where she develops a severe wine problem and starts drinking heavily. And for some reason, she feels inadequate because she can't make the little light grow. And, by her prayers alone, her people are not being healed. She's relying on medicine, and this boy apparently can just wave his hand and heal them. And that's the big conflict. And by the time this conflict comes around in the movie, it's dragged on for so long that the conflict becomes kind of moot, and get on with it, and it's not given the impetus that it really should be given if you want to make a strong religious commentary. So as Sister Eileen goes through this crisis of faith, if you will, and the new boy goes through this learning process, uh, the general theme of the movie that Thornton is trying to get across seems to be that even though conversion to Christianity both helped him in his own director's statement and helps the new boy because now he has personal hygiene, he can begin to speak the language, he is becoming civilized in that he can actually function at simple things like eating at the table rather than shoving everything in his mouth with his fingertips. So as he becomes civilized, he is losing his spirituality from the Aborigine, and he loses his spark between his fingers. So naturally, turning to Christianity takes away rather than gives, even though he has all these things that can function in the world now. So there's the theme, and there's the rub, and then almost as if to uh, uh, accent it even more, there's not a whole lot of like racism that's put into this movie, but in the beginning of the movie there are several graphics that talk about how the Australians back in the 1940s attempted to breed out the black Aborigines by intermingling with other races and try to get rid of the black savage, if you will, of their wildlands. Of course, we know that's not the situation now, but certainly their ranks were diminished greatly when the Australians came in and tried to, weed things. And this is the same thing that is going on in America now. This is why every commercial you see a white woman with a black man because, the social engineers are trying to do the same thing in a more sophisticated manner than they did back in 1940. They're trying to do it now by encouraging this elimination of blackness through interbreeding and what have you. Why they put that in the beginning, I'm not exactly sure. There are not really any strong religious or racial, rather, overtones in this. They're more of a religious conflict rather than a racial one. So there you have it. The name of the movie is called The New Boy. I did not find this entertaining at all. I thought that the conflict between Christianity and the Aborigine wildlife, if you will, could have been developed a whole lot more. Sister Eileen's trauma or her crisis of faith, if you will, is there's no smooth transition from where she was to how she gets this transition. They attempt to make a symbolic analogy with it with a crucifix that comes to the orphanage, and the new boy can see that the crucifix is something important to these folks, but he can't understand why this man is nailed to a cross. So he's constantly doing things like taking the statue of Jesus off of the cross and then trying to feed him in the cafeteria and taking him to a nice bed and what have you. And in the process of this, he begins to show the stigmata in his hands, and this, causes the entire orphanage to go bonkers, although it's pretty much kept under wraps. And it's items like this that could have been, I think, given a lot more play and made this movie a lot more of a conflict thing. But it's almost as if Thornton wanted to put out a strong anti-Christian message, but didn't want to step on too many toes, so he kind of smoothed everything over. And even Kate Blanchett's amazing acting ability is unable to draw out that conflict to the point where you have some kind of interesting entertainment. Think back to Hugh Grant in The Heretic, where there was a big religious conflict, but that was interesting to watch. The New Boy is not. We're going to let this one slip. Give it a D. And now that you have learned what you have learned, here endeth your lesson.
There is a new type of genre called body horror. And, this thing I think is flopping on its face. And our first movie, it's listed as horror mainly because of body horror, but it's really not a horror movie. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the movie is called The Ugly Stepsister, and it comes to us from Poland. And I promised many of my friends I would not make any Polish jokes. But how do you mess up the story of Cinderella? You know what? Maybe it has nothing to do with Poland. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that this is a female director doing horror. And I know you're going to sit back and say, oh, there goes the professor again. He just simply does not like female directors doing horror. And I wish that were the only reason, but time after time after time, it proves to be true. And this movie is no exception. As I said, it's not actually a horror movie. It's the story of Cinderella. And what they've done is they've added a couple of scenes that are gruesome, okay? Like, for example, when the sister's trying to get her foot into the slipper and it doesn't quite fit, so she takes an axe and chops off the top of her foot so it will fit. Stuff like that. That doesn't, I think, qualify an entire movie as horror. I mean, if just gruesome, violent scenes meant a movie was a horror movie, then Sam Peckinpah did nothing but make horror movies. And we know that's not true. He made Westerns primarily. Charles Perrault's beloved fairy tale is placed in the hands of writer-director Emily Blichfeld. Now, she attempts to emulate the same equivalent tone as The Substance. You remember that movie with Demi Moore. I did a review on that earlier and told you that it was a really good horror movie up until the last 45 minutes when it went into the body horror genre. Alrighty, the theme is that beauty is superficial, but along the way, it distorts that message in Cinderella to a mockery of virginity and disdain for utilizing sex to gain societal status. Oh, and it also adds in the stupidity of men. Of course it would. Hey, I think now it's time to get an expert opinion on this, so let's peel back the veils of time and head back to the early Cretaceous period for the nation's first and only prehistoric film critic, Rex Reel.
Cinderella transforms into the evil stepsister as Leah Myron portrays Elvira. This is Leah's feature debut, and she dispenses a stunning performance. Conversely, the wicked stepsister Agnes, played by Thea Sophie Loch Ness, transmutes into Cinderella, but is actually nothing more than a stable tramp. Director of photography Marcel Ziskind performs yeoman duty behind the camera, while editor Olivia Nerod-Holm, one of the dreaded three-named people, is schizophrenic. The first acts of the movie are smooth, but the third act is choppy and scurried. Overall, a banal rendering of Cinderella.
Also in The Ugly Stepsister are Anne Dahl Torp as Rebecca. She plays the mom or stepmom, depending on which character you're looking from. Isaac Komroth as the prince, and Adam Lundgren as Dr. Esthétique. He is the eccentric doctor who attempts to alter Elvira beautiful through a series of quasi-modern cosmetic techniques, all delivered without anesthetic. The entire production is uneven, and inexplicably, in the final act, Elvira and Rebecca begin to refer to Agnes as Cinderella, even though no such character exists in the story. Plot confusion, we call that. Here's a look now at The Ugly Stepsister.
I'm going crazy. I've lost my mind. Best friend insanity. I've lost my mind. I'm going crazy. I've lost my mind.
So there you have it. Those were the movies from 1 year ago. You can still find those along the streamers. So if you piqued your interest by that retro look back, by all means, go ahead, help yourself, and see if you don't agree. In the meantime, let me tell you that you can follow us on Facebook, Outtakes with Rex Reel. It's private, so everything you say will be nice and contained within the movie group. You can also find my weekly movie reviews on Rumble. Just look up Outtakes with Rex Reel and follow us there. It's a great way to stay on top of the movies you love. And now that you have learned what you have learned, here ended